No, it was pretty embarrassing to hear actually the story about the lipstick with Mum. I was just like, really? You thought the battery was a lipstick? No wonder you forget the Wi-Fi passcode. Okay. Ko rihi te manu takiri mai te ata. Ka awatea. Ti hei mauri ora. Ko toku maru toku maunga. Ko wairo toku awa. Ko tainui toku waka. Ko wairo pā toku marae. Ko ngati rārua, rawa ko ngati toa oku iwi. Basically, that means I'm from here. Ko Lorraine, rawa ko Valissa oku mama. Ko David, rawa ko Simon oku papa. Ko Mana, Williams, Eade, aho. Kia ora koutou. So today I'm going to share sort of the journey that I've been on just through my childhood and up until now. And I'll probably start all the way back from when I was 8 months old. So first of all, I was born and raised here in Waido in Blenheim. I grew up with Lorraine, and it feels weird to say Lorraine, you know, when you say your mum's name, it's like, I'm just going to say mum. I grew up with mum and the whānau over in Grovetown, just a little Grovetown. And when I turned 8 months old, I was taken into the care system. And actually, it's quite special today. I just want to acknowledge Auntie Molly, who was my social worker at the time, and was smart enough to be able to recognise that my auntie was actually just on holiday and go over to her place and say, "You're taking him." So that was pretty special, and actually more special because just before, as we were, going in to eat kai, I just ran across Auntie Molly holding a baby that was only 10 months old. It actually reflects on sort of the cycle for me. So I was 8 months old when I went into the care system, and I was extremely lucky because, as I just said, I ended up with a really stable and amazing, well, semi-stable whānau. And I had a really awesome brother, his name was Shane, and a sister Joey, and a dad David. And when I turned 12 years old, so big jump, when I turned 12 years old, I was able to accept whāngai into their whānau and understand that process. It was a really no-brainer because at that stage it was like, mum. So, but in the same year, when I was 12, my brother Shane passed away. And that was a pretty big knock for the whānau. No whānau really should go through that. It sucks. And then we moved over to Christchurch. And this is a dumb idea because there's no earthquakes. But it turned out to be a pretty good move. And then when I was 16 years old, I was asked somehow, there's the big chain of command, whatever. I was asked if I would like to be a youth advisor to the Minister for Social Development. And, being sort of a silly teenager, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, nah. Anyway, Mum forced me to say yes. That was great. That was cool. And quickly I started to learn all the trials and tribulations that so many tamariki go through. And I was sitting in a room of 32 tamariki in Christchurch. And around that room, we all shared something. And I assumed that, they'd all had pretty stable upbringings. Well, that was not the case at all. And quickly, as each person shared something about themselves, I realised I was the only person who hadn't faced sexual abuse in some form, or drug abuse in the family. And I was the only person in that room to have not faced that. So that was pretty, yeah. You just don't really... Anyway, I'll carry on. Anyway, for the first panel, I was declined. I didn't even get in. And I was a bit pissed off about that, but that's okay. And then a year later, I got asked again. And so I reluctantly said yes, because Mum forced me again to say yes. And I got in. And in my first meeting, I started meeting the likes of the Children's Commissioner, Judge Andrew Beecroft, the then Minister for Social Development, Anne Tolley, And it started to hit me and strike me of the seriousness of the weight of being a youth advisor. And so, sort of having experienced and seen all of the things that happened to our tamariki, it was like, well, it was a pretty massive opportunity for me to actually step up and be a part of that and provide insights into what what a healthy, loving, caring whānau actually looks like. And that was pretty special for me because, you know, growing up I'd always actually highly taken that for granted. Then I moved across from Christchurch to Wellington and I started to study architecture because I always thought that that was what I wanted. It was the thing that drove me the most. But on the other hand, I had this nagging thing to help kids. And it was like, and so quickly I was like, oh no, I'll keep trying to work on architecture. But then all of a sudden, all this stuff, all of these relationships I started to come across really started to hit me, and I realized quickly that that was not the place where I needed to be at the time. So March 31st last year, Oranga Tamariki, or the Ministry for Vulnerable, I don't like that word, the Ministry for, I'm going to say children, was started and it was launched over in Pōneke. And I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to open the ceremonies with a karakia. And I was also able to manage to slip in there a bit of a whakatauki. And the whakatauki was ka pū te ruha, ka hao te rangatahi. And it means, as the old net withers, the new net goes fishing. And basically, that was to represent and reflect on all of the stuff-ups that the state had done for looking after, or trying to look after, its young people. And it was a reflection also on the struggles that the communities had been going through. And so I took that opportunity to really shove that in Bill English's face because I wanted him to know. So that was great. That was awesome. And the day after that, so after Oranga Tamariki's launching in Wellington, was the launching for Voice Whakarongo Mai in Auckland. And pretty much, Voice stands for the Voices of Young and Care Experience. And it's an advocacy service for tamariki and care, and it's run by tamariki and care. And I was actually even more fortunate enough to be asked to go and sit on the board of Voice Whakarongo Mai. And since then, there have been, you know, it's still quite small, but there have been a lot of cool things happening in that space. Last July, I was fortunate, I actually took on the opportunity to ride my push bike from Wellington up to Kaitaia. And it took 7 days. And trust me when I say, you know, the people who were following me in the cars, man, they annoyed me. Like, it was so annoying. Like, you're going the wrong way. No, I'm not going the wrong way. I know where I'm going. And that money was raised to support Voice Whakarongo Mai and to host connection events and to send tamariki overseas to conferences. And since then, there have been approximately 18 connection events around Aotearoa. Haven't been any major conferences. Although, speaking of conferences, I just want to reflect on a couple of my friends who, one friend in particular, who just yesterday was announced by the Moko Foundation that they were going over to the UN in New York to talk about Indigenous rights, and his name's Te Pua Erlich. And I also think, I would also like to reflect that Ngā Rawira as well was also asked to go across. So that's amazing. So congratulations. I'm not too sure where you are. But yeah, that's awesome. So getting back on track. Yeah. So what am I doing now? So my role now for Oranga Tamariki is heading the Sports and Recreation pilot. It's not a pilot, it's going to be a program, but it's great. So the Sports and Rec pilot really focuses on allowing tamariki who don't have the money for shoes, or the whānau who don't, caregiver whānaus, who don't have the money for shoes, basketball, or the big one, which is transportation to sports events, to provide them with the support and resources and the connections in the communities to be able to do that. And so that's a pretty awesome little pilot so far. And it's based down in Christchurch East. It's over in Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, and it's also in counties Manukau and South Auckland. Those were three major areas that really needed a pilot like that. And I'm just so fortunate and proud to be allowed to be a part of that kaupapa. So some of the things that I've sort of noticed about Oranga Tamariki, and I get asked this question about, most people would say Oranga Tamariki is just a name change. And that really frustrates me as a person, because it's like, it's not really, because they've actually asked Tamariki what they think. They've actually gone and they made an effort to not just tokenize their voices, but legitimately hear what they had to say. And for me, that's a pretty big step for a state government that historically has done terrible things and has not actually listened to the voices, but have acted unimodally in the honeypot over in, the beehive over in Wellington. So that's a pretty big step, and I'm kind of proud to sort of be in Oranga Tamariki now and walk around the offices and not see people working in silos, but actually be able to take them out for food and talk about the kaupapa of what they're doing, and it's pretty special. So I just wanted to clarify that for a bit. So one of the biggest issues for Oranga Tamariki, or actually the state's attitude, and that is whenever it would go into a site or it would go around to a community, it would actually create a dependency on their services. Things like the benefit or mental health service providers. It's always ambulance at the bottom of the cliff stuff. So the problem is there's none of the actual, teach a man how to fish, don't give him a fish, because you want to feed him for that lifetime, not today. And so I think when it comes back to it, the sports and recreation pilot is a classic example of actually giving the tools back to not just the communities, but the whānau who really need it. Some of the big issues that we've faced with the pilot so far have been the likes that, well, if Tamariki and Kia are able to go and play football or cycling, what are the whānau going to do? The biological children of our caregivers, what are they going to do? They're going to sit at home and watch the Tamariki the young person who's come in from the care system, and what are they going to do? Because we've identified that 60% of care experience or young people in the care system are Māori, and the next 60% of our caregiver population are working in the benefit. So there's not the money or resources to do that. So a couple of the issues are, first of all, how do you help all of the Tamariki go and enjoy and support their Tamariki, their whānau, support their Tamariki out on the football field or rugby field. And also another thing is when young people age out of care or they go into their forever homes and are discharged, that's another big issue, because then all of a sudden all of the supports that you've put in place, they can't be there anymore. So, but that's a financial thing. That's what I want to get to in a second. Some of the bigger challenges that Oranga Tamariki and actually other social service providers have faced is that all of the policies are so numbers-based. They're all about budgeting and getting the money to the people. But that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not necessarily about the money. It's actually also about the connections that you have and sharing that knowledge that you hold with the communities so that they can enable themselves, as opposed to you being there telling them what to do and them creating that dependency on you. So what's next? Well, actually, I was heading over from Pōneke last night, and I was sitting in the airport, and then my boss, Hoani Jeremy Lambert, just popped up and he said, "Oh, yeah, what's going on, blah, blah, blah." That's not how the conversation actually went. And we had a chat, a quick discussion about, this conference. And some of the things that he said were that there's a real nervousness around the inquiry into state abuse. And so I think that's definitely something we need to be mindful of over these next couple of years, is that the stuff that's going to come out of that inquiry into the abuse from 1970, or way before I was born, until now. We really need to protect our rangatahi and tamariki and be close, not just to the tamariki who are in the care system now, but the care experienced young people too. That's where voice needs to step up. That's where the communities need to step up and be there, because what that report will tell us, that'll tell us and give us a clear understanding of the actual abuse that's happened while tamariki are in the care system. And so some of that stuff that's going to come out of that might be really hard for our tamariki. So we need to be sure to be supporting everyone through that process. Another cool thing that's coming up, actually the first one wasn't really a cool thing, it was like a real serious thing. The next part is the child wellbeing strategy. So actually understanding, and this might sound boring from a governmental point of view, what wellbeing looks like. So child wellbeing is a real major topic, and actually it's funny because I study commerce over at Vic at the moment, and I'm doing an essay on child wellbeing strategy. So I'm just like, oh wow, let me tell you. So I think, so the whole cycle for that is important because mum and dad and my brother and my sister, they all acted as a really strong whānau and were able to provide that aroha and that sort of really good moral compass and principles around what it is to be loving and supporting and a reasonable person in general. And I guess in a way, for whānau ora, that kind of is what we need to be helping share around this place and around Aotearoa, is the understanding of what positive, healthy relationships look like, but then also then giving the tools to those whānau to be able to look after themselves as opposed to us telling them what to do. It's about walking alongside. And so it's so cool for me to be able to come along here today and actually share my stuff. And when Lee asked me whether or not I wanted to come along and speak for a little bit, the answer was, well, I mean, Mum's going to say you have to go anyway. But the other side to that conversation is that totally this is the stuff, the kaupapa, that my journey and my background can really play huge influence on how policies are shaped, but not just how policies are shaped, but how the minds of the community and the people living within it, because there's lots, and the people, it's not numbers, it's not data, it's not statistics, it's people who are living in the communities can actually support themselves. And that's something that I really, really thought was like, well, yeah, it's a pretty good reason to go. So here I am. I'd just like to close with a comment that Kura Muehu over in Pōneke told me after I talked about the whakatauki at the start about ka puteruha ka hao te rangatahi as the old net is cast aside, the new net goes fishing. A little comment that he had to say was that whilst it's good to have a new net, the new net still needs to ask the old net where all the fish are. So that's how I would like to close. Kia ora.